Now, the second big focus on this show, a study has found that arterial stiffness is being noticed beyond the normal limit among moderate and severe patients of COVID. This poses a threat to the patient's cardiovascular health as well as kidney function. Now, this study was carried out by a group of doctors at the Patna-based All India Institute of Medical Sciences in the 3-month duration during the peak of the pandemic, and it found cases of arterial stiffness in a majority of COVID patients. To talk more about this, we're joined by Dr. Niraj Kumar, the lead researcher on the study at AIIMS Patna. Thank you so much, Dr. Kumar, for joining us.
Thank you.
So, a lot has been spoken about long COVID and the impact that COVID has on other parts of the body, not just the lungs. So if you could explain the findings of your study.
Basically, what we have done is it's not a very newer thing, but it's newer thing for this COVID-19. Why? Because these arterial stiffness is happening in non-COVID era also. But what we thought of, why we thought of doing this study, because what we thought whether these arterial stiffness is related to this SARS-CoV-2 virus. Why so? Because there are various ACE receptors that expressed in these vessels. And what has happened is that once a virus enters into it, it binds to that ACE receptors, and these ACE receptors are predominantly present in most of the vessels, leading to the endothelitis or endothelial changes or its consequences. So what has happened in our study that initially we have taken lots of practicing on that. We have clubbed our entire study group into 3 parts, where we have taken a mild group of patient, moderate group of patient, and then severe group of patient based on the latest NIH criteria. And after taking proper consent from the patient as well as patient relatives, they were found enrolled in the study groups. And all those patients whom the age group was more than 18 years, and they are needing a hospitalization at our AIIMS Patna. And after fulfilling all our inclusion criteria, they were included in our study. But what was the important thing in our study, that we have omitted all those patients who were previously suffering from any form of hypertension, any form of diabetes, any form of peripheral arterial disease, any form of cerebral stroke, you can say, and any form of myocardial infarction or renal disease. All those patients we have were excluded out. And after fulfilling all those inclusion criteria, we categorized these patients into 3 groups. So what our finding was that it was a very striking differences in all those groups of patients, in the patients who are found very severe. Suppose the patient is having a very severe COVID-19, his SpO2 saturation less than 90%, respiratory rate falling more than 35. In these groups of patients, the arterial stiffness was found so much in a higher range. Normally, you can say that in non-COVID.
And so these were only hospitalized patients. So those who had, serious enough disease to be hospitalized, they are the ones who have been observed with this.
Yeah, but in our hospitals, we initially hospitalize all those patients who are having a mild symptoms or with a moderate symptoms, because all those moderate group of patients needs hospitalization anytime. But in between, we are getting that mild group of patients, because at that time, Patna AIIMS was scattering so much of patients. So we thought that we could take it as a control group also. So we compared it with a mild group, and in our mild group, the total number of patients were 23, and in severe group of patients, the 20 patients were there. And what we found that the arterial stiffness values were much higher than what in the non-COVID era. The non-COVID values were not that much high, and in our group, it was in a tune of around, you can say, 1,416 centimeter per second. So it's very high.
Right. And doctor, is this irreversible, or does this, improve after some time?
Right. Now the very important question is that, because another study that what we are doing right now, we are giving some treatment to these arms of patients, right? Those are patients who have a sudden rise in arterial stiffness. We have measured that arterial stiffness. Then we have added some forms of treatment. So basically, this study is still under process, and we have not included much patients. Our study group lies around 120 patients, but right now the COVID cases has markedly decreased in our state also. So we have included around 50 patients. So in these 50 patients, we are getting good results. After giving those treatment, we are seeing that the arterial stiffness is going down. But still the follow-up is lacking, because we are not following up all those patients who have been suffered from these arterial stiffness, whether it's persisting or
and you've also spoken about diabetes, which is very interesting, because there's been a lot of talk about the impact of and on COVID patients, how some develop diabetes post-COVID.
So these basically these bloods, because even the in diabetes patients, the microvascular or macrovascular complications can arise in these kinds of patients. So diabetes is also important. Although diabetes has been associated with COVID-19 in more of the cases, but our case highlights about the risk of hypertension in these groups of patients, right? And because of these hypertension, lots of end-organ dysfunctions can occur in future.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Doctor, for joining us. And more studies need to be done, to see the impact that COVID has had on people and the long COVID effects and symptoms. Thank you so much for joining.